Word to the wise, we're an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes, as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. This week, that is through the end of Era 2, The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson of Mistborn. I just said all of those words in the wrong order, but you should understand how to assemble them correctly in your mind.
Some assembly required.
Hey there, this is Cross.
PJ, I'm.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
We are absolutely... We're about as complicated as an IKEA bookshelf. It's pretty simple. You can figure it out. You might end up with a couple extra screws. Those are our penises. But we're fine.
I had a better joke, and I just let you go, you know? It's like, we're screwless. We come with the tools because we are the tools. We're not really wood. It's not hard. It's particle board. I'm just kidding.
As a particle board penis is what he's trying to say.
We're starting off so strong. It has
a veneer that makes it look like wood, but it's just particle board.
We aren't even coming in hot this time. What are you doing?
It also has an unpronounceable name.
Today is our wrap-up episode discussing The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. But before we go too much farther, PJ, I have to hear what you're drinking. Can you tell me what you're drinking on this fine day?
3 umlauts.
Oh my god. And what are those O's with the line through it? The slashy O's.
At least a couple of those. I am drinking a pineapple Mai Tai using the acid-adjusted pineapple juice. So, same recipe as what I've outlined before, but it is like 2 1/4 ounces of rum, 1/2 ounce of pineapple juice, 1 ounce of pineapple juice, 1/2 ounce of triple sec, 3/4 ounce of orgeat, 2 dashes of saline solution, and then just a squeeze of lime, all shaken and served with crushed ice. And I've got it in this little tiki guy.
Ooh, little tiki guy. He's holding his tummy.
He is holding his tummy, as they are wont to do.
Yes.
Following that up, I have Talking Waters Brewing Company's Helio Geyser. Easy IPA. So
nice.
Yeah. What about you, Crossan?
I just have a tiki drink today. It is effectively a double because that's usually what I do when I don't have anything to follow this up with. It's a rum drink. It has pineapple juice in it, lime juice, orgeat, two rums. You know, it's kind of just smashed together.
Tiki
classic
bullshit.
Yeah, tiki bullshit. Answer is pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's hard.
Might throw some like Angostura in it.
Once you learn like what tastes good with tiki stuff, it's hard to go wrong with it. Like you really can just throw shit at the wall. And as long as you've got your ratios right, it's going to taste pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Very true. You know, 3 ounces pineapple, 4 ounces orgeat, 8 ounces rum, an ice cube. Don't do that at home, folks. That's not a recommendation. Those are not the real
hot
ratios.
Sugar you've got there.
No, it's cold. Actually, it's whatever temperature your fridge was at. Yeah, right. It's whatever temperature the fridge was. Also, your shaker exploded when you tried to shake that. Also, it didn't all fit in the shaker.
You've got 2 shakers, and you don't know what you're doing with your life.
Wow, that is actually my current status. Thank you for informing everyone.
Same.
All right. Cool. Well, before we get too much further, I guess this is kind of just for the record, we're going to do one more episode covering Mistborn. On the whole, we're going to be joined by Overly Average Ben again to come back and kind of tie a nice little bow on it, since he read through Bands of Mourning and through The Lost Metal to kind of talk about the whole thing. And we're going to talk about Arrow 1 and 2 on the whole, talk about Scadrial, basically. to give this series kind of a full send-off, kind of like we did Red Rising, before we jump into the Greenbone Saga. But PJ, this is our technically third, I'm going to call it full, it's our full third series finished. Red Rising isn't even finished, so I don't even know that I'd qualify. Well, we can call it 3 because we finished the original trilogy. So we'll say we finished 3 sets of series so far. How do you feel? What are your thoughts?
I'm numb. I just feel like things are never going to end because there's just too many fucking books, and I have thousands and thousands and thousands of pages on my bookshelf that I'm not even allowed to touch or open yet. So it's just mostly apathy is what I'm feeling, Crossland.
I get it. I think about that all the time. I think about what's the proximity to our end of the Cosmere and the heat death of the universe, and as more and more writers get brought on to write it, I just feel like it is going to spin out forever, and I'm pretty sure the universe will die first.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. Like so what's another year mean to you? What's up? 23 years?
2 or 3 years.
Oh, 2 or 3 years? Yeah, fair point. We got like 2 or 3 more years. I thought you said 23, and I was like, that's not bad. It's 2 or 3. I could get some shit done in 23 years.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Yeah, fair point.
I'm mean to. I don't know why. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're on fire, apparently. No, but how do you feel now? How do you? Yep.
I have some mixed feelings about the story overall. I think in general, though, I am pretty happy with how most of the characters have concluded their arcs. Or not. There's some ambiguity to it, but
yeah. Okay, cool. So this is usually where we jump into the episode and just begin. But PJ, we have some previous predictions to pay off here, so we are going to go ahead and lead with those on the top of this episode before we go any further. So we've got quite a few to go through here, and then we'll start to talk about the summary stuff. But I'm going to read the italic text. You're going to read your bolded text, and we're going to rehash some of these things. We're going to decide whether or not you provided a correct answer and who drinks. So,
okay.
Wax finds a small envelope on his desk with a small note and a Pathian earring from Harmony, one that says he'll have to make a second one once the proper metal arrives. Curious, what metal do you think he's talking about?
I would assume, based on the name of the book and maybe a couple clues in the text, that they are in the search for atium, and that's what's being addressed here.
I only didn't pay this one off earlier because it was kind of connected to the lost metal on the whole, and so there was, there's some ambiguity. But it was Trellium. That was the earring.
Yes and no, though. Because the goal of maintaining and perpetuating Mars's life was also not very explicit, but present.
Throughout, I'm not talking about the lost what the lost metal is for the record here. I maintained the question because it kind of pertained to the lost metal.
Okay.
If that makes sense, or what the lost metal is, which we can debate. This is strictly about the earring, though. The question is strictly about the earring, and it was not composed of atium. It was composed of Trellium or Bavadinium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Cool. One down. And that's definitely you. And she, once again, specifies that this is an audition, even if she's going to get let in, and gives us a little hint to her own past that she was involved with the fate of empires. I love Maricy's little rip here. Do you think that Maricy is going to bite and join the Ghostbloods?
The Moonbloods.
Moonbloods.
My answer is yeah. Tied to faith as a survivorist, will join. Moonlight is so mysterious. I, for one, am excited to see what happens from here. Is this person or any of the other agents someone that shows up in the other book series? Well, that's wrong.
That's wrong.
That
that's
also
another
makes
one.
Me sound like a idiot child of some sort.
I think it's important to note that as stated previously a couple of times on the show, we have vague notes that are effectively bullet points. Sometimes I write out more verbose questions as we get closer to what I assume the end of an episode is, because we generally get more drunk over the course of an episode, and we need stronger guideposts. But that's really what they are. They're guideposts. So sometimes our recorded answers here are like, I am baby when I read this because,
it's also
it doesn't have all the context around it.
It wasn't intended to be a prediction, and then you decide on the fly, this is a prediction question, and type out what I'm saying.
Also true. I did maybe infantilize you there.
I think that's what this was.
All right, we find the notebook and information on the bomb and why Bilming built the ships to begin with as a way of test launching distances with rockets, of course. If the rockets aren't working, PJ, how do you think they plan to deliver the bomb? Do you think they got one to work?
No, I don't think so. If they had, they would have launched it. My guess is that Dahl is an inside man of the set, and they plan to use him and his warships to simply drop the bomb onto the city. I would like to, first of all, say that the use of the term warships, I think, should give me some credit.
No.
The spirit is right. But
his warships are very different than... I understand. I remember when we had this conversation, I was like, but the warships that they're talking about are the battleships. They're the boats, not the... And you were like, well, his flying ship is a warship. And I was like, I don't believe that. And then I went to the text and I was like, fuck, you're right. They did describe it as a warship too. That's extra confusing.
Yeah.
I remember that verbatim from that episode.
Wouldn't that have been the best option though? To just drop the fucking bomb out of the sky?
I mean, naturally, yeah. It not only that, but it would have resolved the Malwish plotline that is otherwise completely dangling. But we'll talk about that in a second. Would have given us a little bit of a wrap up there.
I don't know if you can even count it as dangling. It's just kind of it.
It's dangling. It's totally dangling, yeah.
But there's not that much. There's nubs sticking out of the ceiling waiting to dangle.
I don't know about that, man. Yeah, the whole Bands of Mourning question mark is pretty big, and how'd they get drained? There's some massive plot threads that are just hanging loose from the sweater of an era conclusion. Okay, we got a couple more. We start with Wax having a conversation with Harmony about doing his part in all of this, since Wax is upholding his side of the deal. We get more from him that Autonomy won't intervene, but that he can choose to stun her, which plays into the end of this, and only if Autonomy chooses to withdraw from her in that moment. He also makes mention during this conversation that other odd things are happening to him, and Harmony says, it is something else, but it didn't work as I'd hoped.
My response was... Jesus, I just want to know what's going on with those vials and Wax at large. I assume Wayne is being affected by this too, considering the trove o' metal mines that he gets earlier.
Metal vials. You said mines.
Yep.
Those are very different things. I'm just saying.
I'm not Crossland. You know this about me.
This is a prediction that was turned into one in post, so this was never written as a question or intended to be one, but because we kind of circled around it, and I was like, this is practically it. You just wanted to know what was going on with those vials, and you assumed that Wayne was impacted in the same way, and that isn't true, not until the very end, in which he sucks down the one vial that has the Luracium in it. In the end, he is affected by a vial.
Isn't that the same?
Not in the spirit of this.
Okay, so Wax also gets vials, a vial drop shipment. And one of them has a red stopper as well. So presumably it is the same sort of function as what Wayne gets.
No, it's the same vial. That red vial is the same vial.
Oh, it's
the vial that Wayne drinks.
Got one?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So he drinks Wax's red stoppered vial. Wax does have the abilities from earlier with the exposure that he got when the Trellium thing went off, which is why for the whole book he's flinching at random moments, and he seems to see further than he can at different times, and he seems to be more powerful. Yep, sees through the mists. There are all those very subtle hints that show that he has slight access to a bunch of metals because of the Luracium, but
But, okay, so here's what I don't like about that.
Mm-hmm.
They very explicitly go into detail about actively accessing their stores of metals for burning. Like, they see discrete piles of metals and actively have to burn them. And that happens in Era 1 as well with Vin. But it's not until she understands the nuances of like what it means to be an Allomancer that she's able to really distinguish like what she's doing. Whereas here, Wax has been an Allomancer his entire life, is very adept at being a steel pusher.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a single moment where you would realize that he's burning another metal.
If you notice, well, I think that there's a couple of things going on here, and I do generally agree with you that it is a little kooky. He's either like generally been knocked on the head, or it's in a very intense moment. Like it's something else has happened to almost make him like trigger the other metal, as opposed to it being something that he's like actively choosing to burn.
I mean, tin.
So it's
tin, for example. Looking through the mists, that's the one that sticks out to me as yes, but why? But how could you not know something was up?
I think it's also trace and trace, right? So it's like the power is so thin compared to the other powers. Like he doesn't have the power of a full-blown Mistborn by any means, as we understand in the Age of Old. He just seems to be a very weak Mistborn.
Well, it's not binary. It's not just on and off.
Well, he only inhaled so much of the dust. Great question, though.
That I don't like that answer. I don't like that answer at all. He just hasn't been ingesting metals, so he just has trace amount of metals. I can buy that as an understanding.
But the metal vials counterpoint to your point on the trace metals, he has the vials from Harmony that have other flakes in them.
Yeah,
intentionally.
Are they full like doses of those metals, or are they just trace flakes?
That's a great question. I'm sure we'll figure out in Secret History too.
I don't like it.
Did you like my little drag there? I'm so sorry.
It's fine. We'll get a Secret History too, and I think it'll be relatively interesting, especially because it'll primarily be following Kelsier, presumably, who is explicitly not directly, well, that's the problem, isn't it? Is if he is directly influencing the story, but he's mostly outside of the like geographical influence of the story.
He would have a very tough time exerting the same influences that he did in Mistborn, Secret History 1. I have a feeling, personally, I've got this itch that if we get a Secret History 2, it would definitely focus still with Kelsier, of course, inside of the story for various reasons. But I also have this itch that says that I think that we would spend a lot of time with Marsh throughout and, see something like Marsh taking Bleeder over the finish line because Harmony couldn't stare at that and like walk her into the spiritual realm. Things like that. Like that's what I see being, included potentially. Yeah. So I think regardless, you're drinking, though, for this one.
I did.
Okay, cool.
I'll drink again.
All right, the next ones were all assumptions based on the end of the novel, going into the final week of the show. Since I don't really have anything to do on this one, it's just you. You read, and we judge.
Sure. Autonomy divested because of the separation from Telsin by Harmony's act. I don't think it works in that order.
It doesn't happen in that order, but I will say that you got the spirit of it correct. But also, I don't think Autonomy is fully divested from the planet. Not that I think that corrects your prediction, but that's more of a general Era 3 prediction. Assumption, Autonomy divested because of the separation from Telsin by Harmony's actions. I think that the intent there was divested from the planet, which you could be right. So I'm going to take the drink because I think that you're mostly right. But we don't have concrete details. Also, this is tasty, so what am I going to do? I'm not going to whine. Cool.
Wayne's demise seems like it's on the table. I hope it's not. Well, it was.
So I drank.
You let that be a drinkable solution or a drinkable.
Yeah, what was I going to do? Tell you no? I said not Deadpool stuff, but basically Deadpool stuff. Like,
yeah, Marcy joins Ghostbloods deep in the police. In the police. You wrote it like that?
No, it corrected police, like a house lease, or like it was
like transcription.
Mm-hmm. No, I typed it, but it auto corrected it.
Why would it auto correct like that?
I don't know.
All right. But is also deep in politics. Joins Ghostbloods is the first sentence there, so that's outright wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But the other 2 points are also right.
Basically, I would say she's not necessarily deep in the police, but she is deep in politics. She's definitely going in that direction. So I'm gonna take a sip.
Okay.
For the final one, we'll push the middle one.
Steris, or nope. Skipped one. Wax fully retires, steps down as senator, doesn't do anything official for anyone anywhere outside of his children and wife. They might move to Bilming to get away from Ellendale.
I did write Lamau phrasing because of what you said, like doesn't do his wife, and I was like, in the episode, I was like, I'm gonna restructure this, but I'm gonna remember that bit and make fun of the fact. Anyway.
Fair. He doesn't step down as senator at all. And he doesn't leave Ellendale.
Doesn't he technically step down as senator as a part of the tour? I don't think that he's still a senator, though. I thought that
tour is part of his,
could be
senatorship and bringing other cities into the fold.
Yeah.
I guess I can't recall one way or another, but
it's kind of a horse apiece.
He's not retired, I guess is the spirit of it. Even if he's not technically a senator, he's still working towards the betterment of the city in an official capacity. And that is counter to what this prediction is going for.
Yeah.
So I will drink for it.
Cool.
First, will become a consultant or author. I feel like consultant is a fairly, it's not official, but she gets an official position. But I feel like the spirit's still kind of the same. What do you feel about this? As far as
you were arguing for a tax consultant, like a business consultant, like that side of things.
Okay.
Here's what I'm gonna do.
Right.
I'm gonna take a drink, but I remembered in the moment being like, you really don't think, motherfucker, that she's gonna get hired after how well this is going? It's okay. I drank for it.
I'll drink for it too.
Okay. We love you. All right, next up.
Harmony. Rest for the god, please. Accused of impotence and exhausted with the way that he's been working against these warring intents inside of him. These warring intents inside of him. Ideally, a nap. Kinda.
I think you're right. I think you're right. That is almost verbatim the way that the interaction between Kelsier and Harmony goes.
Yeah.
So there's that. He isn't going to get rest necessarily, but it seems as though he can relax for a second. Not that he gets a nap or anything like that, but I thought it was a nice touch to say that he deserves a nap, even though that didn't fit the prediction necessarily.
Right.
Cool.
And the
final one.
The friends that we made along the way.
You know what? I don't think you're wrong. I genuinely don't think you're wrong.
I think we cheers to that.
I think we do cheers to that.
Oh, wait, let me get my tiki drink.
Cheers. All right. Cool. Well, now we got some shit to talk about. So that was fun. I love the bit about the lost metal when you said that. And I was like, what's the lost metal? And you're like, the friends we made along the way. And I was like, all right, that's it. That's going in for sure. Maybe we start there. I think maybe we should start with overall feelings about the book. I know that you talked about it just very briefly at the top, but I think that was about concluding and second series and stuff like that. How'd you feel overall about this book? You've had 2 weeks almost to sit with it at this point, considering when you finished reading it and the couple of episodes. How do you feel about it?
Overall, I love it. I love the book. I think in the same sort of fashion as what we talked about with Tress, the end could have done more. but in general, the bulk of it is great. How do you feel about it? You're at the same point as I am in the
yes, right,
in the Mistborn
pretty much
series.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit more knowledge, right? Without question, I've got a little bit more knowledge on a couple of things that are kind of outstanding pieces to some degree, and mostly it's just like loose details that you're kind of missing at this point, not like big, massive picture stuff. But I feel like, so when I read through it the first time, I was like solid 8.5. When we were reading through it the second time, I'm like solid 8.5. But my reasons switched, actually. In a reread, a lot of the things that I liked didn't hold up nearly as much. And the things that I was afraid of not liking and not believing that I was going to resonate with in a first read, specifically what ended up being the Marasi plotline, the gloves off stuff, I liked the first time around, and I did not like the second time around. I had a much stronger reaction to Marasi's plotline the second time around versus kind of liking it the first time. But when you start to get narrow on it, it just kind of falls apart as you, at the very least, and it doesn't fall apart. It all works. There's no like structural issues. I didn't mean it that way, but the character motivations all feel a little wonky, and the reason for doing things and sort of the expediency with which the plot is lost there, or with the immediate comparisons to Era 1 that were made that just weren't trusting the viewer to connect, really happened predominantly in Marasi's perspective. And so I feel like she gets really washed out in this story, and I think she gets undersold. And at first I liked it, but the moment that I got beyond the surface of experience is when that story didn't work for me.
Okay. That's fair.
But the rest of it clicked, which I was shocked, because I did like the rest of the story, but not as much as I liked kind of that core underneath. Yeah. So.
Okay.
So I was happy to see Moonlight again. Like it was very cool to see that character again, because it's from a different story. And like that was a shocking please. But at the same time, I'm like, does this even feel like the same character in a reread too? I'm like, it doesn't quite read the same either. So there's like an inconsistency of the way that she feels written as well, which just didn't land. So there were a couple of different issues, but I still really like it. I think that's kind of the net takeaway is, it went from an 8.5 to an 8.5. It's just like my review text changed, which is very silly. It feels, but yeah.
Perfect.
Like Steris's entire plotline, like really solidified for me in this go round. I liked it the first time because it felt like it really built the character out. But I also, I got way more out of it the second time around, considering how dense it is with comparisons to the past and how she's changed and evolved. So I just really liked it. Yeah. What were some of the things you didn't like, or what didn't stand out to you? We've said mixed bag. Liked it, really liked it, but
I guess Marasi in general is kind of the biggest one for me. She has this great arc, and there are just some decision making that I think we got into, and I'm like blanking on the specifics of right now, that I feel like could have really solidified her arc as a character. And just what's the one I'm thinking of? Like I know I made a point about it in the last episode. Do you remember?
Was it in relation to the harms? Was it in relation to?
Fuck.
I don't remember. I can pull up the last episode's notes.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna do the same. I know I wrote in the notes, I did not like this. Yep. Okay. Oh, it's when she's like wondering if anyone will know that she was a part of the like city saving efforts as well. Like that made the entire character arc and the moral decision to stay on the constable's path as opposed to joining the Ghost Bloods feel completely irrelevant. I'm not like for whatever reason, that one fucking sentence left enough of a bad taste in my mouth that I like kind of diverted all of my positive energy away from Marcy's story arc.
Yeah, it would be something different if she was indecisive. You know what I mean? Like if Marcy had a decision complex problem, but she is generally so like at this point in the story, especially, she's so like line focused on different things. I remember in the moment, the only rationale that I could give her is like, it's been a rough 10 hours or 11 hours. So like, you know, she's seeing all these things and loving that hustle bustle in the city, but she's overwhelmed and full of pastries, full of that bread cream.
And giving some credence to the decision-making process. There are constables, there are cops, there are police officers, there are public officials that get praise for the good things that they do. And what she did was turn her back or turn away from a secret society which would guarantee that she would get no public praise for anything good that she did. So I can understand the want for a public perception to be good, especially now, understanding that she's also vying for a governorship. So good publicity as a constable and as a detective is beneficial for her bid for public officialship.
And you could also simplify this down a little bit and spin in another direction to say that like this is beneficial for her from an ego standpoint. She, at the beginning of this novel, when we're introduced to the other constables, the other female constables of whom have joined over the course of time, that she's inspired to join because of the stories of the bands. That's a big deal for her in the beginning of the story, and the way that she's impacted people. And it especially has a lot of impact or resonance with me because, or not with me in particular, but I find a lot of resonance in it with her like idolization of Vin that she kind of like leans into, and she says that everyone does, and so she wants to be a different role model, but then also her idolization of Wax, right? And so she's falling in the same traps and premises as before, and then she has this opportunity to work in obscurity, but it's almost as though her ego, not entirely her ego, but she has this belief that it's better to be that statue in the park almost, like Vin, versus, you know, the quiet manipulator of Kelsier to some degree.
Yeah.
Almost directly, actually. But
that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, Marcy, unfortunately, is the character that, like... So, my problem with this book in general, and this is something we can talk about, is most of the characters actually feel resolved before we come into the story, right? Like, Wax's story is done. And for the most part, at the end of the Bands of Mourning. And Wayne's story is the only one that's really left kind of hanging. Marcy's come to the conclusion that she doesn't need power anymore, and so she's not going to seek that anymore. She has a really good resolution. Steris has found that she is more useful than she ever thought she was. And so we basically, this book is just an escalation of everything we see in Bands of Mourning. So my like super hot take that I talked about our patrons with on Sunday was, I think that you should cut Bands of Mourning as a book and make this a trilogy. I think you just axe it, because Bands of Mourning also only introduces plot threads that aren't getting resolved at all in the rest of this book in the series. Like,
they are referenced, though.
Of course they're referenced, because they can't be completely ignored once they're there. So you just rewrite it without them, and it's fine. The entire Malwish plot doesn't technically need to be here.
Like, after publication, as
no, you can't. I'm saying from a constructionist standpoint of like, if you were building the series, or even if you were adapting it, I would axe Bands of Mourning, unfortunately.
Man, there are many like technological things that happen in Bands of Mourning
that are so cool, but that are totally irrelevant in this story.
All of the Allomantic grenades.
That's one thing. Tuck it into Shadows of Self.
Okay. There'd be some rewriting.
There'd be some complications. I'm not saying there aren't. But what I'm saying is like, there are all of the plot threads, pretty much all of the plot threads that were brought up in Bands of Mourning are irrelevant or are relegated to complete sideline action in this story.
Yeah.
It's my hot take.
Not wrong.
It's definitely a hot take. I mean, I'm not... I think Now that we're out of the series too, to some degree, done with this, how would you rank the books?
Ooh. Shadows, Lost Metal, Alloy, Bands.
Is that bottom to top? Top to bottom? Shadows at the top or bottom?
Top.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. Yeah.
Okay.
I also love the Indiana Jones story, don't get me wrong, but the Indiana Jones story could have also been the end of this trilogy if it had an extra 100 pages to resolve the Set and Trell, you know what I mean? Or Telson. Like, it didn't need to escalate necessarily to a world-ending thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I think I'm with you. I think Shadows ends up being my favorite in the end because it does the most character work for a lot of these characters, and we see what they have to overcome, and they do get paid off, book to book to book. So it is good to have the full series as we do, because we would have never seen the Wayne payoff the way that it did, which I think is the best thing of this book to me.
What's surprising me about my gut answer to that is, like, I was so gung-ho about this book to begin with. And I do love it. But I really thought it was my favorite Brandon Sanderson book to date. And then, like, I don't want to say it fell off, but maybe it's just recency bias, and now I've got, like, the whole book under my belt, so I can kind of look at it retrospectively like I can with the other books, and I think that's where it falls into place.
There's that, and we did also read 2 other Brandon Sanderson books in the middle of this book too, right? Like Warbreaker and Tress.
Fucking good.
Yeah.
I do, like, I think Tress and Warbreaker are both, like,
they're both in my top
bickering
5.
Back and forth for 1 and 2 for me.
Yeah. I think Warbreaker still stands as my top book, and then maybe a couple of the Stormlight Archive books, and then Tress, and then something else. I would have to think on it a little bit, but
I mean, right now it's somehow all 7 Mistborn books are the bottom 7 because Elantris, Warbreaker, and Tress are all, like, I think it's probably, if you pressed me on it right now, I think I'd go 1 Tress, 2 Warbreaker, and 3 Elantris. But that might shift if you ask me in like 10 minutes. So
yeah. We're gonna have a formal ranking for sure when we have Ben on to rank all of the Mistborn books in order. So we'll take some time and thought to officially iron these thoughts out. But it's good to have, like, a gut reaction, because I also think I'm with you. I think that I remember originally reading this and originally getting done with it and being like, wow, that was awesome. And I do still really like the book. Again, 8.5. But some of those issues that I have with this are some of the things that I also was repeatedly kind of bringing up in our episodes that we were recording, where it's like, I like this story. If more stories, though, are like this in the Brandon Sanderson universe of things, I think that could lead to some serious storytelling problems that I would not enjoy. I would like for this to be the outlier, not the norm.
That's fair.
And I enjoy it as an outlier. I don't think I would enjoy it as the norm.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So yeah, my hope is that the stories don't trend this direction. I understand naturally that they will when it becomes more sci-fi. I think I'm okay with that once it hits full sci-fi, full space shit. But on the grounded shit, it doesn't work for me nearly as well when you're trying to tell a fantasy story.
So would that still be sci-fi, or would that be like futuristic fantasy? Or like that's the question. Fantasy?
The thing is, and I understand the inclination to lean science fantasy, there's something to be said that these are just science fantasy to begin with because of how grounded they are in a physical system.
That's what hard fantasy is, right? It's just as it gets more modern, you get more like you feel the need to call it science as it gets more modern.
Yeah. Yeah, hard fantasy is more that there's like a description of rules and things and systems, and it's supposed to emulate real systems in real worlds. So including science, like you're saying. I think that this is,
I'd argue.
It definitely is. This definitely fits into like the subgenre of hard fantasy. I would agree with you. Science fantasy is generally closer to Star Wars, where it's like there's some magical mumbo jumbo with spaceships, you know, like we don't fully have it explained. There probably is an explanation somewhere of midichlorians and how everything technically works. It's been completely ousted or jousted away, but you know, at some point, Red Rising is kind of science fantasy almost. It doesn't really have the fantasy elements nearly as hard, so I tend to not call it that or put it in that category.
I feel like that's pretty hard, like pretty strictly sci-fi.
I agree. And I don't want to get into necessarily the details of where and why, but I think that it borrows from that group of stories more than it does traditional sci-fi, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's got more in common with Star Wars than and Dune, but Dune is more technically explained. But it's got more in common with Star Wars than, say, an Asimov book does, which would be like generally considered sci-fi.
Okay.
So, yeah. But I think as we move into the future with the series, I think I'm more okay with the world overlapping more and more. But we got to be at space technology or something. And it also can't feel like it comes out of nowhere as a Deus Ex, which was the other problem of the Ghost Bloods. And it doesn't help that I don't like Kelsier to begin with at all anymore. So
that's another thing is the Deus Ex. Not to bring up, it's because you brought up the term is why it's like striking my brain. But that interaction with Hoyd at the end, and Hoyd
I think the Hoyd one is the one that makes
last couple books has been kind of a sticking point for me, and doesn't feel fully understood. And maybe A Secret History 2 would truly make that make sense to me. But I don't understand why Hoyd... I don't understand Hoyd and Wax's relationship. Unless Wax understands that Hoyd is something closer to Harmony than a citizen.
No, Wax definitely doesn't understand shit about Hoyd.
Then I don't understand.
Wayne seems to have an impression, though. That's more interesting to talk about comparatively.
That's a good point.
Wayne seems to be onto him. Wax does not appear to be onto him. I need to grab bitters. This turned weird. So one second. You can talk more about Hoyd, though.
So I guess the biggest thing for me is that Hoyd and Wax interact several times and seem to restart the relationship. Or connection, however you want to call it, in a way that doesn't align with how Wax generally interacts with people and remembers people. So it feels too glaring to be just an overlook. But I don't understand it.
The Bands of Mourning party really still fucking with you, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah, I can still confidently say that there's a reason for the Bands of Mourning Schadenfreude, but I can't tell you why, unfortunately. But what I can say is that he definitely would not recognize Hoyd in that situation, even though he refers to himself as Hoyd.
Okay.
Fair. So I don't like it, though. That doesn't mean that I like that, especially because here's the other side of this for me. Why would Hoyd want Wax to know that Kelsier is alive? Like, why would he give him that medallion? Hoyd fucking hates Kelsier and his objectives. That's my issue with it. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I got the other way. Like,
he's trying to make him aware?
Kelsier hates Hoyd and his, pursuits. I never got the impression that Hoyd hates Kelsier also. Like, it felt like a one-way hatred. Like, they didn't feel like opposing forces. It just felt like Kelsier didn't like Hoyd.
Interesting. The thing that kind of pushes me in the other direction is a note that happens in Maricy's perspective when she's meeting Moonlight and they're driving in cars, and Moonlight says that I'm not sure if it's me watching him or if he's watching me, and that's why he's around. And they're talking about Hoyd being in the other car. Earlier on when they're driving to Bilming.
I didn't see that as a Kelsier direct connection.
Oh, I'm okay. I do see that as a Kelsier direct thing, but then again, you don't at that point fully have that connection that this is Kelsier yet. That's the leader of the Ghost Bloods. So for me, reading that feels like it's a. I don't think so yet. I don't think so. I think she says my mentor still at that point.
Interesting. I can't remember.
Because they're on the way to the raid of Bilming, where we meet that constable lady of whom is dropped as a character after those two scenes with her that introduces Governor What's-His-Nuts in Trone.
Yeah.
Again to the story. So yeah, I don't know. I can understand the conflict there. I see the opposition of the two forces. Not necessarily that Hoyd doesn't want Kelsier to succeed in protecting Scadrial, because I think that he ultimately does. He seems to be on the side of Harmony as they have conversations as well. But, yeah. It's not like he's an antagonist. He just doesn't like Kelsier's vibe.
Fair.
And, maybe Hoyd needs a vibe check. I'm not going to protect the boy.
I do imagine him with a bowl cut. Is that wrong?
It is factually wrong, but I love it. I love it. There is a lovely picture from Tress of Hoyd that I'm going to send here if you haven't seen.
I'm just going to Google albino bowl cut.
It's coming in the chat. From the climax where he's wearing, you know what he's wearing. I don't necessarily ruin it for anyone.
I mean,
just a dude with white hair.
Okay, that's fair. This is kind of what I imagine, but older.
Pretty much. Yeah. Okay, I can see where you're getting at. He's a little bit more coiffed or well dressed than that. I say as we're staring at him wearing socks and sandals, but yes.
Yeah.
I can understand that though.
And a Hawaiian shirt.
The sort of modern, for anyone, of course, of whom can't see these pictures, which is everyone, the modern, bowl cut that's going on right now is, the hairstyle of, Machine Gun Kelly had it for a while. All of that genre of...
That era of bowl cut.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who else kind of is emblematic of it. I was are one of the Paul brothers, Logan or Jake? I don't know.
Should we get into some listener questions?
Yes, let's do that. Did you have before we do that? I want to bring up one thing before we go into listener questions, because we've talked around it quite a bit. I want to talk about Kelsier. I want to talk okay. Kelsier and the Ghost Bloods inclusion in the story. What did you think of the Ghost Bloods, Kelsier, Moonlight, Twin Soul? Codenames are stupid.
I guess that's another point where I wish there was something more outlined in the story, because it really didn't feel like, to have been so established, it didn't feel like they have that much to show for it in our purview, Can
you explain what you mean more by for having so much established? You mean for spending so much time on the page with them, or
no, for them having been established as an organization and operating for as long as they have been, with as big of a roster as they have. It doesn't feel like anything super large has been their direct influence, and maybe they've helped, and maybe they've had their hands in things in small ways. So far, it doesn't seem that there's anything really, really huge until the end of this book, with the assistance of Steris, which is not counter to, but an aside from their main objectives. They really haven't contributed to any of the storylines that we've been exposed to, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with you. I feel like that's the big bummer for me, is that we go through and we introduce this organization basically to info dump about the Cosmere in this story quite a bit.
And
also,
give Marcy a moral conundrum.
Yeah, right. That she didn't need. Which, I mean, in and of itself, I guess it's reaffirming the character. That's fine. But yeah, I think that's my end result too, is that like I feel like the Ghostbloods, for being this super intimidating and secretive and helpful organization, did ultimately help in saving the world, but you'd feel like they could have done more. But at the same time, if they would have done more, then what was the point of bringing our characters along to begin with? Also, I would reiterate another time, what was the point of bringing our character along on that side quest to begin with, outside of trying to win her over to join? Like, I don't know. That's the plot that doesn't work for me nearly as well on a second read.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, it's still... Yeah, let's clarify. It technically works. It just doesn't... It's not my taste. It's not my flavor.
It doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, right.
Like, this is an easy plot line to write out if you don't need Kelsier to exist within the story.
Right, yeah. And then also, the only reason that you kind of want Kelsier to exist in this story is to pay off the setup of, like, the medallion from the last book. But do we even technically pay it off? All we know is that he's alive. So it's like, we knew that. It's such a mishmash of things. And I want to say that I think some of that is the sort of outset of the story being kind of an unintentional one, versus the sort of plan for Mistborn was to be composed of 3 eras, the second of which was the spy thriller that's now become Era 3, and then to go into Era 3, which was supposed to be the space era. We've now basically inserted something, and so it seems to have thrown a wrench into plans, but it also is allowed to set up chess pieces. But setting up those chess pieces has just left, I think, this era feeling kind of unsatisfying. This gets into a listener question. So, were you satisfied with the way things were resolved? Why or why not? This includes all kinds of notes, like the Men of Gold and Red. You know, there's a lot there. But I realized that we were talking about this, and I was like, whoa.
Bringing up the Men of Gold and Red, that's anticlimactic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't get anything that comes through. Not even one that we can, like, detain and investigate. Like, that felt very empty threadish. Like, obviously the threat was there and it was thwarted, but, like, we don't get anything out of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you on that entirely. I think that was one of my big qualms, are a lot of those components, right, that get raised there, where it's like, well, why didn't we have one come through? Or why didn't we see, I don't know, someone go through and fight one on the other side to, like, hold them back? You know, that pivot to the story of, like, imagine, if you will, some fractional multiversal version of the Cosmere in which Wayne is with Marcy, jumps through the portal, fights off the things as she fights to burn the portal, and is closed as he dies on the other side fighting the Men of Gold and Red. Like, we would get to see what, like, the actual threat of that scene and moment is. We would get some crazy closure between the sacrifice that Wayne makes to for Marcy, which is a huge deal for their partnership. And I get that we see this on the other side with Wax, so, like, I wouldn't... It's a tough call. Just as an example, though, like, there are so many other ways that this could have been done. Could it be that the bomb opened the perpendicularity? Like, something. I don't know.
Yeah. I do like the way that Wayne's ending comes about. It's emotional. It's physical. It makes sense. I can't help but think that a bomb on a warship isn't that... Like, I feel like there's so much more that could have been done to really amp up the stakes.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, what was there was done really well. So I can't complain that hard about it. I feel incredibly Minnesotan in my, like, responses right now, as far as my accent goes. Like, I don't know why, but I'm, like, picking up my own accent.
What about spinning this a different direction? What about Telson, Bavadin, Autonomy, and Trell? What'd you make of that Satisfied? Yes, no?
No. I don't know that much about Trell Bavadin at all, and we really don't get a familial conclusion between like Wax and Telson even. Like she just kind of dies and Bavadin retreats. Like that's it. Like we don't get a substantially meaningful emotional payoff to that familial fight that's been going on for several thousand pages.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest bummer of a decision that was made in Bands of Mourning to some degree to blow up Edwarn. Like, can you imagine what this would be like if this were Edwarn at the end? We actually had some emotional buildup and resonance with him throughout a lot of the plot. And Telson, meanwhile, like the backstab was great in the final moment, but she could have died in the cell the same. And I would have felt more emotional resonance with Edwarn because he was in all 3 books and was like built up to be a bad guy. And then instead he's the one who gets exploded randomly in a jail cell. Yeah. But to Autonomy's point, it's not as though I expected Autonomy to be defeated in this story. I know that Autonomy is in another couple of short stories and is very clearly infecting, worlds and is using this sort of avatar system to spread out. But I can't help but also feel a little bit underwhelmed by the portrayal of Trell, while simultaneously like being really excited for Autonomy as a villain. Like I think that Bavadin is pretty cool, but at the same time, by bringing in this shard to make this stake really big, and then not having it be like a really big resolution for that same payoff of like defeat, just it leaves like a dry taste in the mouth, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Tell you what, PJ, I think I like Hero of Ages more now than I like Lost Metal. More than we talk about this. At the very least, that ties up with a nice bow, even if it gets sacrificed at the altar of secret history.
Fair.
The Malwish are another one that goes kind of unresolved inside of this whole thing. This one, to me, feels like the biggest Era 3 setup, and I think I just kind of have to be okay with that, because he had to set the groundwork functionally for it to make sense. I don't like that, though, but I functionally can wrap my head around it.
I think what makes sense the most to me, I agree. I think this is primarily an Era 3 setup. I don't believe the Bands of Mourning are drained. I think that there was whatever the metal is that like blocks allomantic use somehow also applies to the Bands of Mourning. And that is the power that Admiral Dahl is equipped with. And I don't know if he's actually an official like liaison of the Malwish people. So I think we're going to be dealing with a lot of misinformation and both sides having different information and understandings of what's going on, fighting a third party of whoever Admiral Dahl is allied with. That's my prediction of like the immediacy after Era 2. I don't know what that means for Era 3, which is inherently probably a time jump. So you would think that would get resolved, at least to a certain extent, before Era 3 happens. So it feels like an immediate problem, not a long-term one, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you fixated on the idea of him being like a fraud to some degree to me, because I don't get that at all. I do get that this is a setup. It does feel deliberately like a setup, but I don't think that he's not connected with the Malwish Nation or that like he's acting outside necessarily.
You don't think there would be like word sent ahead of time if they were to send a different, what's the term? What was he acting as? The ambassador? Like they wouldn't send word that they're sending a new ambassador. Like he just shows up as the replacement for the ambassador with no other information.
I mean, everyone knows that he's a war hero.
Okay. The Malwish governor couldn't say like, hey, by the way, different dudes coming to you instead of like, here's a warship
probably not.
And a different ambassador.
Yeah.
And we're just going to believe what he said. I don't know. I don't know.
The other ambassador leaves knowingly. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like it does. That doesn't feel like the unbelievable part to me.
I don't know.
I think he knew that the bands were a setup. I think he was sent there. And here's the thing, PJ. I feel like you're playing this off as like he's an outside actor of the Malwish and like the Malwish people's intents. I don't think that's true.
I'm cool with the Malwish also being malicious towards the human people that we've come to know. For whatever reason, the story is set up in such a way that I believe that he's not a part of that.
Interesting.
We'll see.
Personally, I don't get that. But my conspiracy theory on the other side of this is that I think Alec is in on it as well. I think Alec is entirely in on it.
Okay. I could get
this. What Alec just went from like a teacher, smart pilot dude with like a high station in, the Navy in theory to being a fucking bread cook.
Yeah.
Pastry chef. Okay, buddy. I want something good for Marcy on the other side of this. So like, I hope that doesn't happen to her, but at the same time,
Right.
Yeah. I think that the Malwish are the ones that stand out to me as the plot thread that's going to be drug into the next era, but also the one that it's like their direct involvement with so much of the Lost Metal feels so unnecessary to me because it could have just been a lingering plot thread in the background, in the broadsheets even of this story to say like, hey, tensions are rising. To make it so front and center makes it feel like it needs to resolve in this storyline to me. And that's ultimately why I think I was really unsatisfied by it.
That's fair. Yeah.
And why it feels the most Marvel after credits tease for the next thing versus being something subtle to pull the thread on, right? Like the entire idea of like Harmony being unbalanced and like, the Discord thread that we talked about last week and whatnot. So, all right. We have another question here, PJ. All the way back from Alloy of Law. The question here is from Rags, from our Discord, from our patron. Do you think Miles' 100 lives could have survived the explosion that killed Wayne?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it really depends. We know that he can survive. Was it us that came up with this, or was it like outlined that like decapitation couldn't work because he'd like grow his head back quick enough?
I think that we were talking about Deadpool at one point, and then it was like a question of like how far does this go into that direction? But yeah. So other than killing him until the gold runs out, which can take a lot of time, the first way would be via hemalurgy if you can manage to remove the ability. Nearly always fatal, yada yada yada. Healing him nets. If he brings a bomb, he can blow himself up along with another trap, then heal himself. So he did, if we remember back in Alloy of Law, he did blow himself up at one point and then heal himself.
So, but that has to be pretty controlled. It really depends on where his metal mines are and how the explosion affects him. I think there are situations in which he could survive that, but it's so dependent on how prepared he is for it and how how he's torn apart.
Yeah. There is this thing. There's a word of Brandon on it. So good question. Like, so if you bisected Miles in half, right? Like perfectly in half, which side would regrow? Or would, and the halves were separated immediately before the healing process could begin. Would the two halves each regrow into a whole Miles? Which is a fun question, to consider. In all of the Cosmere's shard-based magics, the greater portion of the bisected body regrows the lesser portion. If it were done exactly halfway, the soul would jump to one or the other randomly, and that would regrow.
Okay.
Is the answer.
Interesting.
So, yeah. The larger remaining chunk, and I'm sure part of that would also have to do with like the metal mines themselves, because of compounding, and the way that would work is they would heal and maintain the space around them better. Yeah, I don't know.
So, hear me out. What if you take a big guillotine, and you
a big one
bisect almost perfectly in half, right up to the gooch, like head down to the gooch, but you don't let it like separate. So you've got one person, and they're like this. They look like an X, and then these two sides start to regrow. And then only when like they're mostly done forming, the regrowth process on both sides, you let the guillotine drop and cut the gooch. And then you've got two mostly formed Miles 100 lives.
One-legged Miles.
They both only have one leg, but they both
and one arm.
No, their arm would grow with that.
I think I'm so glad we went in this direction. I feel like the answer to this is more like if you were bisected in that way, you would just like start to use your feet to like wiggle yourself down so that you could like escape the guillotine on the bottom side. But
then you've got two fully functioning brains.
I don't think that they would be fully functioning. I think
you don't think they'd be fully functioning?
No, I do. I think that your hypothetical does not work the way that you think it is. That's my pitch.
You'd have left brain and right brain connected by a single blood vessel through the gooch.
Yeah. But then what happens is when you stand up, you try to resume your form. So when you eventually move, it would try to meld you back together.
There's got to be a leg, right? If you're doing anything like complex computation wise, there's got to be a leg as the blood. Nah, it's not blood. It's not blood based. I don't know.
This is very complicated for seemingly no reason.
It is pretty much reasonless. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like how does one even try to resolve this? And I feel like the answer is it's better to not, because I don't think it would happen. I don't think that Miles would survive the explosion. I think compounders are very powerful, but I think the reality is that he would probably heal himself at such a rate that like he wouldn't outlive the explosion, the drowning, everything else that accompanies.
I think that's probably correct.
It's the biggest damn explosion there ever was.
Yep. What there ever was.
Yeah. So yeah. Compounding is really interesting, though. I think that's a good question. So we got some larger theory questions here from Zypress. Thank you so much for sending these in. I also wanted to mention the Sicer that we had last week was excellent. Obviously, we talked about it at length. I forgot to call it its name during the episode. It is Of Ruin and Preservation is its name, because it is perfectly balanced, was recovered from that nearly destroyed batch, and turned into something very unique and special as a harmonization of everything. Worked great. I got real drunk. It was really good.
Yep. Same.
Did you finish it? Did you finish all yours?
No, I've still got a little bit left, but I shared some with Kaylin while we made pizzas.
What'd she think?
She liked it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I finished mine that night.
Oh, no.
Yeah, while I was on the phone with everyone. Yeah, afterwards.
Good.
Yep. I wasn't planning on it, but then we were sitting there talking for so long, I was like, sweet, I'll just keep going, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really good. I'm only sad that I don't have more, but needless to say. There are larger theory questions here, and so these are going to be things that are going to pertain to the wider Cosmere, potentially, and or things in Era 3. Nothing crazy, of course, but, you know, things to think about and consider. Not just kind of book theory, book recount questions. So, what are your theories and thoughts on the shadow behind Sazed, and how might that affect Era 3?
Maybe a second consciousness that, while Ruin and Preservation were two bodies conjoined to a single consciousness, maybe there was a floating, like Ruin's consciousness was detached and has been kind of trying to find a way to connect itself. And maybe there will be a devil on Sazed's shoulders going forward that he has to actively try to fight against to a certain degree.
Sure. I gotta say, one of the things that intrigues me thinking about this. I like the idea of the devil on the shoulder and kind of the split personality, not split personality necessarily, but split intents, pushing in different ways. I think it's important to say that ruin is more powerful than preservation, because preservation did put more of themselves into humankind, as it were. And preservation did, I mean, like, we won in the end, but that balance never rectified itself. Like, all of humanity still has a lot of preservation in them. And so ruin just is more powerful. And I think that's gradually eating away at the balance that is harmony.
That's fair. Yeah.
So I think devil on the shoulder is maybe a result. It's like what I'm doing here, PJ, is I'm not refuting your theory. I'm just giving the equation that I think leads to your theory to some degree.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's like devil on the shoulder, or if it's something like they start to lose the faculty to make decisions as succinctly as they did before. Or maybe it's a little ruin as a treat, and then some preservation as a treat, and then more ruin as a treat. I don't know.
Ruin as a treat is a good dessert name at like a fancy restaurant.
A little ruin as a treat.
Yeah.
It could be fancy, I guess.
I don't know.
Oh boy, you fancy. What is going on? I love you. Do you think Mistborn will ever truly come back, either by hemalurgy, medallions, or Lerasium/Harmony's intervention?
Yes. And I think it's going to be outside of the control of Harmony at this point. We know that Lerasium has been produced. Like, this is another thing that I'm like frustrated with, is that Kelsier epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
Their argument feels futile, and it feels like it's just passing on and creating more frustrations down the line. I think Kelsier is going to discover Lerasium pretty quickly, because he knows that these explosions create atium, and that's still a desirable outcome. So he's going to pursue these explosions, and he's going to accidentally end up with Lerasium as well. And like, that's going to happen really fast, I think. Like, maybe a couple days after this conversation with Kelsier and Harmony. Like, it's going to happen really, really quickly. So Mistborn are going to start popping up more and more often. And we know that that can then get passed down genetically. It's not super common, but it can happen. So as soon as you start introducing Mistborn into the gene pool, we're going to end up with a population that has genetics that have the potential for Mistborn. And it sounds like, to me, based on the way that everything was described, it's not impossible for a Mistborn to be born. Or rather, let me rephrase that. It's not impossible for a full Ferrochemist to be born. It might be impossible for a full Mistborn to be born. It's just that the Ferrochemist outcome is very, very rare. But it was never outlined as impossible. So I don't know where I'm going with this at this point. I'm not sure.
Yeah. There was wasn't there like a silly hint that was almost tucked in at the end that suggested that
it's happened almost.
Not only that, it's I think it's a stretch further than that, where it's even like potentially Wayne was a full Ferrochemist. Like there was something that I remember reading really funkily right at the end.
I didn't catch
funkily.
That.
You heard me correctly.
We know he gets surprised when he's able to read another metal mind, which to me says that he has had experiences where he wasn't able to read a metal mind.
Yeah.
But that's different than reading another metal.
Right. Yeah. It is different than another metal. There's also, this is one of those weird things too, where this Ars Arcanum to me is funkier than all of the other ones combined, because it feels like almost every other Ars Arcanum is reflective of things and knowledge that you get and or attain within the book itself. It feels like it is a textual recap for you that's written in a particular character's voice. This one does not feel like that. This one has additional context and information that feels outside of the immediate scope in some ways.
But it does still feel in universe in a lot of ways.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm not saying it feels removed from Chris's voice of whom they're written in, but it does feel like every other time it's been a result of like, here are the things in the book in case you need a refresher. This is where you can go to get your refresher. This literally has a section on hemalurgy that goes in and expands upon it on the whole, even from the understanding that we get from the books.
Is that a function of it being farther down the line historically?
One assumes, but I don't like it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's my issue.
So could this retroactively become better for you if more books within the Cosmere like shine the light on the things that she's talking about historically previous to
I don't. It feels like more after credits teases, and I don't like that. As opposed to revealing something to me in a story, give it to me through the pages, through the text. Give me the world context. This is that's the issue. This section of the books has always been like a recap, basically, on things or a way to catch yourself up. But in the end, the final section on the spikes is like something, it literally has narrative to it. And it's like, if it has narrative to it, why aren't you exposing me to it in the story? I don't view these Ars Arcanums as story. And maybe that's my bad, but at the same time, I don't view most of the appendices of stories as the Bible of text on the thing. Like, if you're, for instance, cast of characters in the front of the book doesn't necessarily... You can't change the description on me on a cast of characters list and then be like, go with it. And what? Why would I do that? Like,
unless you're Pierce Brown.
Well, that was a fucking error, which is a little bit different.
It wasn't. It was right. It was just an oversight.
No. There was another one that was a literal error. I know you're talking about the oversight. There was another one that was an error that suggested someone was married to Darrow's mother, who was not.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, I have, after lengthy questioning, obtained an interview with Marsh, the one known as Iron Eyes on Scadrial. Before this says, something odd is happening with the nature of spikes and hemalurgy on Scadrial. A particular note to any arcanists who study the nature of intent and connection. It's like, why are you telling me this as opposed to exposing me to it in the story? And it goes on and on and on to say that, like, compounding, and it gives more material things as to, like, how mechanics work on things, but it's like, why?
Yeah.
It goes on to talk about, like, modern souls, however, seems simply to reject spikes of this magnitude.
Why?
Like, yeah. Where's the context? Why is this important? Yeah, I don't know. It's another little bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Another little bummer in the book for me. But I do think as well, to answer the question here, I think I'm with you on the Lerasium coming back. I think you're entirely correct that Kelsier is going to, on literally in 2 hours from the moment of this meeting, is already beginning to set off little explosions to try to repeat whatever Wax did. And we know that Wax did something special with the electrolysis process, we assume, I think, based on the experiment that he was doing. Something in that regards.
Still alive and can be interviewed.
True. Yep. Right. Yep. Could be interrogated. Could be tortured to death by Kelsier. Because why not? Kelsier has no morals. Yeah. So, wouldn't it be really sad for poor little Max to not have a dad?
It would be, but I mean, does Kelsier care about that when you're dealing with the lives of a noble?
Oh, also no. I see where you were going. I didn't make the connection right away. Yeah. Fair point. But I also think that hemalurgy has a big stake in all of this, no pun intended. I don't think that that'll be bring back full Mistborn. I didn't realize what I was saying until it was too fucking late, and I had to out-pun myself or un-pun myself. I don't know. I'm a little bit torn on hemalurgy. I feel like medallions are going to democratize a lot of abilities, and that's kind of the idea. what if Mistborn but BioShock, basically, is what I see.
You still need the physical, like, Allomancer resource in order to create these things. So
yeah. So instead of going to a clown vending machine that screams "savings at the circus of values," you go to a dude on the corner who's like, "Yeah, Matenai, give me your tin thing. Give me your tin thing. You got any drug bugs?"
Do you think they do that, or do you think they create contracts with the Walgreens of the future to
that? Probably also that. But I think there's got to be some illicit ones, right? Like there's got to be some...
There's going to be some black market allomancy going on. But for the most part, I feel like they'll probably go through a consolidation process.
That makes sense. I don't think that Sanderson is the writer for this, but he did make the joke about doing like a cyberpunk Mistborn era, right? As like a offshoot, because then you could do 16 medals and 16 books. It'd be cool. And I don't disagree with folks. I don't think that Sanderson can write risquély enough, or wouldn't choose to write a risque enough story for it to feel like a good cyberpunk story.
Yeah.
In the same way that I would want of the underbelly, which is what like cyberpunk tends to be. So, but I think that someone else should. I think that Dan Wells should be brought in to write that one, because he would love to write about a bunch of seedy guys doing that kind of stuff. Because he would write the drug dealer-esque Allomancer who charges up with duralumin in a medallion so that you could super burn, And that's your main character, is he's a duralumin misting who charges up metals for other people so they can go get tin blasted out of their minds on someone else's medallion. There's so much potential there.
I mean, imagine a rioter hired by a brothel to just kind of sit in the middle of the building and just inflame the emotions of all of the clients.
Yeah. We kind of get that in a unique way with the Soothing House, right? Back in Shadows of Self.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same. They're paying to be soothed, but like on the other side of that, yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. You could see a lot of modern things augmented very, very subtly by allomancy, emotional allomancy, like specifically.
Yeah, I totally think so. So I think medallions are going to play a big part of it. I'm only bummed that they didn't play a bigger part in this story. Not going to lie. Yeah. It kind of all the things, I'm the most bummed about missing that entirely as a plot point or as a thing.
Mm-hmm. They weren't absent, but they weren't so necessary that they had to be there.
They were the only medallion that's mentioned.
Oh, medallions, not the grenades.
Yeah, the grenades are different. The grenades are fine. They function on et metal and whatnot. So a little bit different, but I understand where you're going with it. That makes sense.
It's the same technology.
Yeah, one assumes it's close. I'm not sure it's the same technology exactly, but it's
close.
Roughly the same advancement, whatever. I can equate that. I don't need to be a dick about it. Another one from Zypress here. Harmony states that there is a way to use the metallic arts for space travel. Do you have any predictions on how that might work?
I mean, my assumption is that it's a progression upon those medallions like we talked about, and steel pushing I think is going to be very, very important. If there's a way to create an anchor that is maybe really heavily metallic or magnetically attracted to the spaceship itself, but still is able to be used as an anchor to push against, so it's like constantly moving with the spaceship, but is technically separate, so it can be pushed on separately. That could produce an effect of like sustained propulsion, but I don't know.
I feel like bend alloy is our trick here. I think that bend alloy, basically creating something that allows for us to almost move the speed of light, if it could be manipulated and launched and moved in some way, shape, or form, is going to yield something.
So they can move physically at a speed that's not super fast, but the experience of the traveler is near speed of light. Is that what you're saying?
So Wayne physically sees the electric pulses slow down, right? Which should move incredibly fast. He's approaching the speed of light in those moments. And so the assumption there is that there's something relative to the way that they're moving inside of the bubble that just needs to be turned into an engine to move something forward, or to create a bubble that can do, I don't know. I think that there's some time mass dilation thing that we're going to have to deal with. Time as mass is kind of what I'm thinking. So maybe what that is your anchor is someone that burns chromium, Nicrosil is what?
Nicrosil.
That's what Marcy burns, right?
Marcy burns chromium.
Chromium? Yeah, so you have someone who burns chromium on one side, and that is like it's your slow time equivalent, so like on Earth or whatever. And then you have someone who's burning bendalloy, and you somehow have someone pushing against like a hyper time slow bubble on the one side, and they're able to push themselves relative. I don't know. I just see time and mass with metal equating to speed.
Okay. That'll be fun to see.
Yeah. I also think your theory could totally work. I think that would be closer to like standard propulsion, and we don't know how far away these things are. So my assumption is one of we're going to have to go a really long way. So we're going to have to make faster than light work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. We shall see. Cool. Well, this is also obviously the wrap-up of Wax and Wayne, and we haven't talked about them at all in any way, shape, or form. I know that we obviously spent a lot of time talking about Wayne's wrap-up last week, because naturally that's pretty much the highlight of the whole episode. Did you have anything left that you wanted to say about Wayne? The resolution of his arc, the handing off, the hand-me-down to Alriandra, all of that jazz?
I really like the inclusion of the passing off to Alriandra. I like the story mirrors that it creates. But I almost kind of feel like that was a regression to a certain extent. To be that heavy into Alriandra in his will compared to how he's towards the end, realizing that he's been torturing this girl. She hasn't been wanting him to do this all of her.
You think that that's a regression?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think it could have been a large sum of money without being his entire estate. Though at that point, where would his estate go? And that's a who? I don't know. I don't have a problem with it, but I feel like it could have been a very large sum to help her for the rest of her life, while also not being my entire life was dedicated to you kind of conclusion.
His entire life was dedicated for making up for that wrong.
Yeah. But that's the thing that's being wrestled with.
That kind of counters. But that decision would have need to been made beforehand. True. Okay, so yeah. Because he doesn't really come to terms with that in the moment, right? He has this note written out long beforehand when he ultimately.
That's true.
Perhaps a long time beforehand. So yeah, I see your point. I don't feel like it undoes anything, because I think that it is the sort of desync between when things were initiated, when his will was written versus when he actually died.
His funeral, as it were. His funeral and his death.
Right. Right. God, what a funny scene. That will forever go down as one of my favorites of the book, I think. Just the general tension of Wayne being chased around by these people and then being like, oh God, what'd Wayne get into? And then him just being obscenely wealthy was just such a good defiance of my expectation, especially for Wayne. Mm-hmm. It was delicious.
Yeah.
Very delicious. Yeah. What about Wax? Or anything else on Wayne?
No, I think that's good on Wayne. Wax in general. I kind of like where he ends. The campaigns to unify the roughs and the outer cities. I think that makes sense for him. His family is safe. Steris is being offered a position that like perfectly matches her personality. As far as I understand, like she's never really held a position before. So it'll be good to see her like her strengths go towards something in an official capacity, like as productive. I don't know. I kind of like the resolution there. What do you think of it?
I like it. I think I like his resolution. I think I like all of it. I just kind of wish that like Max would have fallen into a pit, you know? Like oh no, we lost the kid right at the end. He fell.
Oh no, I should have named him better.
Oh no, he fell. It was so sad. He fell right off the tower. Dad wasn't there to catch him. He wasn't, you know, didn't realize his dad wasn't there.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, no, I'm totally fine with where Wax ends up, and I think that honestly, it's all set up very well for me for kind of the way that he goes out, and I think that it makes logical sense with how he kind of winds down his life. I don't assume, you know, obviously, I think he's going to have long-reaching impacts on sort of the foundation of this new nation that is growing out of the sort of Ellendale Basin and creating states, you know, the United States of Ellendale or something like that, or a Vindom, or I don't know.
A Vindom?
Vindom, yeah. I don't know. What are they going to call them?
I don't know.
Yeah. The Vindominion. It's like a condominion, but depressed and was a thief as a kid.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah, I think that he logically makes sense. I love Steris's. I really genuinely like Maxilium cannot be a character in Era 3 under any circumstance.
Depends on the time gap.
Nope. I'm not going to tolerate it.
All right.
Max needs to go straight to jail.
Straight to jail.
Straight to jail. Tidwell is okay though. She can be involved in the story in some substantial way. And maybe the third kid that they have, or the third child that they have, that'll be a full-blown Mistborn, I'm sure. So
Villand. It's Vin and Elend combined.
Yeah. Vin and Elend. Those will be the names of the kids. Jesus.
Villand.
Oh God. You know what? Here's the deal. If Kelsier doesn't die in the next book for real this time, I'm done. He's got to die. He's the first villain. He's got to just suddenly pass away.
Oh no.
Violently. I'm just kidding. I won't be done. But come on. Kelsier needs to go. Fuck. There's something else that I really wanted to say here about Wax. So there are characters that I think will actually make it into the next era to some degree, or that I wouldn't mind seeing. I do truly think that I want Wax to kind of be done. I want Wax's story to be resolved. I think that he should be dead and in the ground, just in terms of also the passage of time. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just feel like that feels about right for where he is. I wouldn't want him to get roped into something else. I would love to see an elderly stateswoman Marasi, though, in the worst kind of way in Era 3. I think that would be incredible. And I feel like she's really the only other character that I want to see return. I mean, we may see Dahl come back, or we may see Alec again, but
yeah,
I imagine we'll mostly focus on other things. But I would love to see, you know, she doesn't need to be a perspective, but even in the backdrop of the pictures, Elder Marasi would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But not Maxilium.
No, Maxilium falls at age 13, and yeah, fell right into a blender.
No.
So So sad. You got chopped into little bits to fit, you know?
Oh, no.
An industrial forge, maybe?
Wonderful.
I would feel very bad for Wax and Sarah, so I hope that they never find out. I hope he just absconds and disappears forever and they never learn of his death, but he did die during an unfortunate industrial accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Kitchen spoons. Yeah. I don't know. There's got to be something really unfortunate. It's got to get dicey. I mentioned Maracy. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say on Maracy?
I feel like we've tackled Maracy pretty succinctly. So
sure.
I think we're pretty well encapsulated for the story.
I think so. That was really the last one that I wanted to kind of pull up on. Is there anything else that you want to round this out with? Anything else that you want to send Mistborn off with? Bottle on the ship? I mean, we've got one more episode on Era 1 and Era 2, but
I'll see you when you're truly cyberpunk.
All right.
But until then, have a good sleep.
All right. So with that, we are going next week is actually a double header for the first time in a while. The first episode that's going to be coming out is going to be I'm so sorry. This episode is a double header. What am I talking about? I'm getting my dates all mixed up. This episode is being released in conjunction with our episode 0 of Greenbone Saga that you can listen to right now. Go do it. In which we are joined by Ben and Aaron and Thomas from Howlerpod, and High Key Obsessed. And we are so stoked to begin this coverage and talking with them and building out this show for the next 6 months or so, chatting about those books. So super stoked. Go head over there and listen to our brief intro on kind of some structural changes that we'll be doing for the show just to accommodate everyone being there, and hear a little bit about everyone and what they've been doing and how we're feeling.
One of them individually are the best person I've ever met in my life. So
I'm only a little offended. I'm right fucking here.
Oh my God.
Too. I'm okay. It's fine. I get it. I'm trash. So, yeah, next week is going to be our final episode on Mistborn, the series. I actually need to double check the schedule. What did I do to myself? Did I?
Well, checking the schedule, I'm going to thank our producers, Tim and Andrew, for helping us keep our show's lights on. In general, you can check our links in the show notes where you can find our schedule, our Patreon, our previous episodes, our websites, fucking everything, all in one very nice, easy, convenient location.
Yes. For the record, just in case you were curious, the schedule is actually correct on the website, so I am just fucking moron and didn't look at it. So on the 2nd, we have both this episode and the Jade City episode coming out. Then on the 9th of February, we have the Mistborn series wrap-up coming out, followed on the 16th by the first episode, to give people a little bit of time if they want to pick up Jade City and get reading ahead, or, just give some people some time. That intro episode is coming out a week, almost 2 weeks before the first episode comes out. So
perfect.
Just want to let y'all know my fuck up. As PJ had mentioned, though, you can find us on social media and all of those other beautiful, wonderful places. Words Whiskey Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. wordsandwhiskeyshow@gmail.com if you want to send us a lovely email, such as a wrap-up question or whatnot, or questions that you may want us to answer. We typically would pull those up on the show if you want us to give them a go. You can join us at patreon.com/wordsandwhiskey to get in on all of the Devil's Cuts, all of the side chats. The last episode we live recorded, and it was a lot of fun. PJ was a little toasty. So
I was so fucking drunk. Oh my God.
Some editing tricks make that look not so bad, so we're fine. And you can get our t-shirts at present on TeePublic. Make sure you follow that link. Also want to take a second today to thank a upgrading barback to a bartender, Siri, for making the jump up between tiers. Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you. Game nights, all the bonus shows, and everything else like that. Beyond that, we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.